My name is Elisa, and at 32, I never expected to be in a deposition against the company I once loved. But there I sat watching the color drain from my former CTO Ryan's face as his own lawyer inadvertently destroyed their case. Just 3 months earlier, Ryan had leaned across his desk, eyes cold as he spat that non-compete means you don't touch a keyboard for a year. I just smiled, knowing something he did not. Before I tell you how I defeated a multi-million-dollar tech company, drop a like and let me know where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you love stories about justice prevailing over corporate bullies. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska where technology was more of a luxury than a necessity. My parents were hardworking people. Mom taught at the local elementary school, and Dad worked as an accountant for a small firm. We were comfortable, not rich, but they always made sure I had what I needed. What they could not have predicted was how completely obsessed I would become with computers after my uncle gifted me his old desktop when I was 11. That chunky beige machine with its loud fan and slow processing speed was my first love. I spent hours figuring out how it worked, learning basic programming from books I convinced my parents to buy me. By 14, I was building simple websites and small applications. My bedroom walls were plastered with printouts of code instead of boy band posters. "Elisa, dinner's ready," Mom would call, often having to repeat herself 3 or 4 times before I could tear myself away from whatever programming problem I was solving. High school was socially challenging, but academically rewarding. I was the girl who raised her hand in computer class to correct the teacher. Not the best way to make friends, but I could not help myself. The passion I felt for technology was overwhelming. I dreamed of working for a major tech company creating products that would change how people lived. When it came time for college, I was accepted to State University with a partial scholarship for computer science. My parents were proud but concerned about the cost. I promised them it would be worth it. "This degree will open doors for me," I assured them. "Technology is the future, and I want to be part of building it." College was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be a woman in STEM. In a lecture hall of 100 students, only 12 were women. Group projects often meant being sidelined or having my ideas attributed to male classmates. Professors would sometimes direct technical questions to the guys sitting next to me, assuming I was there to fill some diversity quota. During my sophomore year, I met Jessica, a teaching assistant for my data structures class. She noticed me staying after class to ask additional questions and invited me to the Women in Computer Science Club she ran. "You have real talent," Elisa, Jessica told me over coffee one afternoon. "But talent is not enough in this industry. You need resilience and a support network. The boys have had that naturally for decades." Jessica became my mentor and friend. She had graduated 5 years earlier and worked at several tech companies before returning for her PhD. Her guidance was invaluable. She taught me how to command respect in technical discussions, how to document my contributions, and how to navigate the often subtle gender politics of the tech world. "Never apologize before speaking," she advised. "Men do not do that, and neither should you." By senior year, I was excelling in my classes and had completed 2 summer internships at local tech companies. The experiences were valuable, but not exactly cutting edge. I wanted more. I wanted to build products that millions of people would use. 2 months before graduation, a recruiter from Techvision reached out on LinkedIn. Techvision was not a household name yet, but in tech circles, they were generating serious buzz for their innovative approach to artificial intelligence for small businesses. The opportunity to interview with them felt like winning the lottery. The interview process was intense, a phone screening, a technical assessment, and finally an all-day on-site with 6 different interviewers. I prepared obsessively, sleeping only 4 hours the night before the on-site interview. The Techvision office was everything I had dreamed a tech startup would be. Located in a renovated warehouse with exposed brick walls, standing desks, and a fully stocked kitchen. Everyone looked busy, but happy. People smiled as they passed each other in the hallways. I wanted desperately to belong there. My final interview of the day was with Ryan Taylor, the Chief Technology Officer. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with the confident demeanor of someone who had achieved success early. "Your coding challenge was impressive," he said, reviewing my file. "You found an optimization that even our senior engineers missed." My heart swelled with pride. This was validation from someone at the top of his field. "I believe in giving talented people room to grow," Ryan continued. "Techvision is not like traditional companies where you wait years to work on important projects. If you have the skills, you get the opportunities." I left that interview feeling like I had found my dream workplace. When the offer came a week later, I accepted immediately, barely negotiating the salary in my excitement. The compensation package included stock options that could be valuable if the company continued its growth trajectory. On my first day, I sat through the standard onboarding presentations and signed a stack of documents, including the employment contract with its non-compete clause. I remember skimming it, noting that it prohibited working for competitors for 1 year after leaving the company. It seemed standard and reasonable at the time. I was planning to stay at Techvision for years anyway. Why would I ever need to worry about a non-compete? "Just the usual paperwork," the HR representative, Grace, said with a smile. "Nothing to worry about." I signed without a second thought, eager to begin my real work. That signature would later become the center of a legal battle I could never have anticipated. My first 6 months at Techvision exceeded all expectations. I was assigned to the core AI engine team, working on algorithms that help small businesses predict customer behavior and optimize inventory. The work was challenging and satisfying. I often stayed late not because anyone asked me to, but because I was genuinely excited about what we were building. By my 3rd month, I had identified a significant flaw in our recommendation system and proposed a solution that improved accuracy by 23%. Ryan personally congratulated me during the company all-hands meeting, and I felt like I was soaring. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that drives Techvision forward," he said, his hand on my shoulder a bit longer than necessary, but I dismissed the discomfort. This was my moment of recognition. In my 8th month, I began developing a new feature that would allow the AI to incorporate seasonal trends without requiring manual input from users. The idea came to me while helping my dad with his accounting firm's inventory issues during holiday seasons. If our software could automatically detect and adapt to these patterns, it would be a game changer for small retail businesses. I spent weekends and evenings refining the algorithm, testing it against historical data, and documenting every step of my process. When I finally presented it to my team, the response was overwhelmingly positive. "This could be its own product," my colleague Diana said. "You should be very proud, Elisa." The feature launched 2 months later and immediately attracted attention from industry publications. New customers specifically cited the seasonal prediction tool as their reason for choosing Techvision. Our sales team reported a 15% increase in new contracts. I felt validated and valuable. That was when I first noticed the shift in Ryan's behavior. During a leadership meeting where I was invited to discuss future enhancements to my feature, Ryan presented my work as if the initial concept had been his idea. "When I identified the gap in seasonal prediction last year, I knew we needed a sophisticated approach," he said, making eye contact with the investors in the room. I guided the team toward this solution. I sat stunned, unable to process what was happening. Had I misheard? Was this some strange form of corporate politics? I did not yet understand. I looked around the room, catching Diana's sympathetic glance. After the meeting, I approached Ryan directly. "I noticed there was some confusion about the origin of the seasonal prediction feature," I said carefully. "I wanted to clarify that it was my original concept and implementation." Ryan smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Elisa, in successful companies, we win as a team. No one person can claim sole credit for innovations that build on our collective infrastructure. As CTO, I provide the vision that makes individual contributions possible." I left his office feeling unsettled, but told myself this was perhaps normal in corporate environments. Maybe I was being too sensitive about credit. The important thing was that the feature was successful and helping our customers. But similar incidents continued. In team meetings, my male colleagues Patrick and Nicholas would restate my ideas and receive the acknowledgement I had been denied. When I sent detailed proposals to Ryan, he would forward them to the executive team without my name attached. Gradually, I started being excluded from strategic meetings where my feature was being discussed. Diana, who had been at Techvision for 3 years, invited me for coffee outside the office one afternoon. "I wanted to talk to you somewhere private," she said once we were seated at a corner table. "I have seen what is happening with your seasonal prediction tool, and you should know this is not the first time." Diana explained that Ryan had a history of appropriating work from female engineers. 2 talented women had left the company the previous year after experiencing similar treatment. One had tried to raise the issue with HR, but Grace was close friends with Ryan outside of work and had dismissed the complaints as a misunderstanding. "Document everything," Diana advised. "Every email, every meeting, every line of code you write. You will need proof if things get worse." I took her advice seriously, creating a secure digital journal of all my work, including timestamps, witnesses to conversations, and the evolution of my ideas. I also began subtly marking my code and documents with identifiers that would prove authorship. The situation deteriorated further when I discovered through a company-wide email that Ryan was preparing to file a patent application for my seasonal prediction algorithm. The draft application listed him as the primary inventor and me as a secondary contributor. I spent a weekend researching employee rights and intellectual property law. According to our employment contract, Techvision owned the rights to anything developed during my employment, but accurate attribution of inventors was still legally required for valid patents. On Monday, I requested a private meeting with Ryan to discuss the patent application. His assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute slot at the end of the day. "I noticed the patent application for the seasonal prediction system lists you as the primary inventor," I said when we finally sat down. "Since I developed this system from concept to implementation, I believe the inventor order should be reversed." Ryan leaned back in his chair, a cold expression replacing his usually charming demeanor. "Elisa, you seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding of how innovation works in established companies. Your contribution, while useful, was built entirely on Techvision's proprietary infrastructure and my strategic direction. I have detailed documentation of the development process," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "The concept was original to me, based on experiences with my father's business, not company infrastructure." "Documentation can be interpreted in many ways," Ryan said, his tone suddenly threatening. "Before you pursue this further, remember that performance reviews are coming up, and I would hate to see your future at Techvision compromised over a misunderstanding about contribution." I left his office shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This was no longer about credit. This was theft of my intellectual work and a thinly veiled threat to my career. That night, I called Jessica, my college mentor, and explained the situation. "Unfortunately, this is not uncommon," she sighed. "But you have options. You have been smart to document everything. The question now is whether you want to fight within the system or consider other paths." I decided to try addressing the issue internally first. I scheduled a meeting with our CEO, Andrew Peters, hoping that Ryan's boss might be more reasonable. 2 days later, I sat in CEO Andrew Peters' office, nervously clutching my laptop. Andrew had built a reputation as a fair leader who valued innovation. Surely, he would see the injustice of what was happening. "So, Elisa, what can I help you with today?" Andrew asked, his tone friendly but distracted as he glanced at his watch. "I am concerned about the patent application for the seasonal prediction system." I began opening my laptop to show my documentation. "I developed this system from concept to implementation, but the application lists Ryan as the primary inventor." Andrew's expression shifted from mild interest to discomfort. "That is a serious allegation. Ryan has mentioned this patent as one of his key innovations for this quarter." I showed Andrew my digital journal emails and code commits with timestamps. "As you can see, I conceptualized this feature before any discussion with Ryan. I have the original algorithms written in my own time, the testing data and witnesses who can confirm I was the sole developer of the core technology. Andrew reviewed my evidence with a deepening frown. This is concerning, but Ryan is a founding member of Techvision. His technical leadership has been instrumental to our success. I respect his contributions to the company. I said carefully, but this specific innovation was my work. I'm only asking for proper attribution. Andrew promised to look into the matter and speak with Ryan. I left feeling cautiously optimistic, but that hope was short-lived. The next morning, I received a calendar invite for a meeting with Ryan, Andrew, and Grace from HR. When I arrived, Ryan was already seated beside Andrew, both looking grave. Elisa, Ryan began before I had fully sat down. Andrew shared your concerns with me, and I have to say I am deeply disappointed by this attempt to claim sole credit for a collaborative project. He proceeded to present a completely distorted version of events, claiming he had outlined the concept in a leadership meeting months before I joined the project. He showed emails where he had provided feedback on my work, framing them as directive guidance rather than the minor comments they actually were. Furthermore, Ryan continued the timestamps on Elisa's documentation could easily have been manipulated. We have no way to verify when these notes were actually created. I tried to defend myself, showing the original file metadata and witnesses who could corroborate my story. But Ryan had clearly convinced Andrew before the meeting even began. Both of you have presented compelling evidence, Andrew said diplomatically. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. For the patent application, we will list you both as co-inventors with equal contribution. Now let's put this misunderstanding behind us and focus on moving the company forward. It was not justice, but it was a partial victory. The patent would at least include my name, though I knew without doubt that the invention was mine alone. The following weeks were tense. Ryan maintained a professional facade in group settings, but excluded me from important meetings and decisions. My performance review, previously scheduled with my direct manager, was suddenly reassigned to Ryan himself. The review was brutal. Despite exceeding all my technical goals and creating a feature that had measurably increased revenue, Ryan rated me as meeting expectations in most categories and needs improvement in communication and teamwork. There have been concerns about your ability to collaborate effectively, he said, sliding the review form across the table for my signature. Several team members have noted that you seem to prioritize individual recognition over group success. Which team members? I asked, suspecting this was fabricated. I am not at liberty to say, Ryan replied smoothly. But the feedback was consistent enough to merit documentation. I reluctantly signed the review, knowing that objecting would only make things worse. As I left his office, Ryan added casually, "By the way, we are reorganizing the teams next month. You will be moving to the Legacy Systems Maintenance Group. Your experience will be valuable there." It was a demotion in all but name. Legacy Systems Maintenance was where careers went to die at Techvision. The cutting-edge work, the work I loved, would now be off-limits. That evening, I updated my resume. If this was how Techvision treated innovation, I wanted no part of it. The tech job market was strong, and with my skills and the success of the seasonal prediction feature, I knew I would have options. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 interviews scheduled. By the end of the month, I had 2 offers. One was from a small startup with exciting technology but uncertain funding. The other was from DataSphere, a direct competitor to Techvision, with a more established market position and a reputation for better treatment of employees. The DataSphere offer came with a 40% salary increase and a senior engineer title. The role would involve building next-generation prediction systems directly utilizing my expertise. It was perfect. I drafted my resignation letter carefully, keeping it professional and brief. I scheduled a meeting with both Ryan and Grace from HR to deliver it in person, wanting to handle my departure by the book. 2 weeks' notice is standard, I said, sliding the letter across the table. I am happy to help with knowledge transfer during that time. Ryan skimmed the letter, his expression darkening when he reached the part mentioning my new employer, DataSphere. You realize your contract includes a non-compete clause, correct? I am aware of the clause, I responded, having researched this extensively. But given the circumstances of my departure and recent changes in state law regarding non-competes, I do not believe it will be enforceable. Ryan's face flushed with anger. That non-compete means you don't touch a keyboard for a year, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. If you think you are taking our technology to a competitor, you are sorely mistaken. I just smiled, which only seemed to infuriate him further. Grace cleared her throat uncomfortably. ELISA non-compete agreements are legally binding documents. Breaking one could result in significant legal consequences, including financial damages. I understand the risks, I replied calmly. I have made my decision. Ryan leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. If you go to Datasphere, Techvision will sue not just you but them as well. Is that really how you want to start a new job, by bringing a lawsuit to their doorstep? I maintained my composure, thanked them for the opportunity to work at Techvision, and confirmed my last day would be in 2 weeks. As I turned to leave, Ryan called after me. You will regret this, Elisa. I promise you that. That weekend, I met with Rachel Bennett, an attorney specializing in employment law. I had found her through a Women in Tech forum where several members had recommended her for cases involving non-compete disputes. Her office was small but professional, with framed law degrees and thank you notes from past clients adorning the walls. So you signed a non-compete agreement when you joined Techvision, Rachel summarized after I explained my situation. And now you have accepted a position with Datasphere, a direct competitor. Techvision is threatening litigation. Did I miss anything? That covers the basics, I confirmed, but there are some important contextual factors. My former CTO stole credit for my work, demoted me after I complained, and has a history of similar behavior toward female engineers. Rachel nodded, taking detailed notes. Those factors may be relevant to how a judge views the situation. But first, let us focus on the non-compete itself. Do you have a copy of the agreement you signed? I handed her the document, which I had carefully saved from my onboarding package. Rachel read it thoroughly, occasionally making notes or highlighting sections. This is interesting, she said finally. Are you aware that our state legislature passed a new law 3 months ago significantly restricting non-compete agreements? I nodded. That is partly why I felt confident accepting the Datasphere offer. Good research, Rachel smiled. The new law specifically states that non-compete agreements cannot be enforced against employees earning less than $150,000 annually, which, based on what you have told me, would include your position at Point.EPS, Techvision. Furthermore, she continued, even for higher-earning employees, non-competes are now limited to 3 months' duration, unless the employer can demonstrate extraordinary circumstances, such as possession of highly sensitive trade secrets. The 1-year restriction in your agreement would no longer be valid under current law. The best part, Rachel added, leaning forward, is that the law was explicitly made retroactive, meaning it applies to agreements signed before the law was passed. Techvision's legal team should know this, which makes their threats either uninformed or deliberately intimidating. I felt a wave of relief, so I am in the clear. Rachel held up a cautionary hand. Not entirely. They can still sue you. The law is on your side, but that does not prevent them from filing a lawsuit, which would cost you time and money to defend. Some companies use litigation as a scare tactic even when they know they will ultimately lose. What do you recommend? I asked. Be prepared, but proceed with your plans. Start your new job at Datasphere, but be extremely careful not to use any proprietary information from Techvision. Do not take any documents, code, or data with you. Do not discuss specific details of Techvision's technology or business strategies with your new colleagues. I assured her that I had no intention of taking anything proprietary. My value to Datasphere was my skills and general knowledge, not specific Techvision secrets. Rachel prepared a letter responding to any potential cease and desist from Techvision, citing the new law and warning against frivolous litigation. She also helped me draft an email to Datasphere's legal team, giving them a heads up about the potential dispute. Transparency with your new employer is crucial, she advised. They need to know what they might be getting into. To my relief, DataSphere's legal counsel responded supportively. They were familiar with the new law and confident in their position. They even offered to cover my legal expenses if Techvision pursued action, considering it an attack on their hiring practices as much as on me personally. I started at DataSphere the following Monday. The environment was refreshingly different from Techvision. My new manager, Samantha Wilson, was clear about expectations and generous with recognition. My teammates collaborated without the undertone of competition I had grown accustomed to. For 3 blissful weeks, I thought perhaps Ryan's threats had been empty. Then the lawsuit arrived. Techvision Incorporated versus Elisa Mitchell and DataSphere Technologies. The complaint alleged violation of the non-compete agreement, misappropriation of trade secrets, and tortious interference with contract. They were seeking an injunction to prevent me from working at DataSphere, damages of $500,000 in legal costs. My hands shook as I called Rachel. They actually did it, I said when she answered. They are suing both me and DataSphere. Send me the complaint immediately, Rachel instructed. Do not talk to anyone from Techvision and inform DataSphere's legal team right away. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers and depositions. DataSphere stood firmly behind me, their legal team working alongside Rachel to build our defense. They were particularly interested in the pattern of behavior Ryan had exhibited toward female engineers. If we can establish that your departure was essentially forced by discriminatory practices, it further weakens their non-compete claim, explained Rachel. Courts are increasingly reluctant to enforce agreements that would effectively prevent someone from working in their field after experiencing harassment or discrimination. I reached out to Diana and other former female colleagues who had experienced similar treatment from Ryan. Some were hesitant, fearing retaliation or damage to their own careers, but 3 women ultimately agreed to provide sworn statements about the hostile environment at Techvision. Meanwhile, the financial and emotional toll of the lawsuit was significant. Despite DataSphere covering my legal expenses, the stress affected my sleep, my concentration, and my ability to perform in my new role. Samantha was understanding, adjusting my workload and deadlines while I dealt with the legal proceedings. We hired you because we believe in your talent, she assured me during a one-on-one meeting. This lawsuit only confirms we made the right choice. If you were not valuable, they would not be fighting so hard to control you. Her support meant everything during those difficult weeks. The tech industry can be coldly practical, discarding people who become complicated or controversial. DataSphere's willingness to stand by me, a new employee bringing legal baggage, was both surprising and touching. As the case progressed, we discovered through the discovery process that Ryan had a documented history of claiming credit for subordinates' work, particularly women. Performance reviews written by him consistently downgraded female engineers in subjective categories like leadership and culture fit, while male engineers with similar technical performances received glowing reviews in those same engineers' categories. We also found emails between Ryan and Grace discussing how to handle my complaint about the patent attribution. In one particularly damning exchange, Ryan wrote, "We need to manage Elisa's expectations about recognition. Too much credit now will only encourage more demands later. Better to establish boundaries early." Each new piece of evidence strengthened our case and my resolve. This was no longer just about my right to work at DataSphere. It had become about exposing a pattern of discrimination and intellectual theft that had likely affected many women before me. The weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing were intense. Rachel prepared me rigorously for what to expect, including mock cross-examinations where she played the role of Techvision's aggressive attorney. They will try to portray you as disloyal, ungrateful, and technically less competent than you claim, Rachel warned. They will suggest you only got the DataSphere job because of stolen knowledge. You need to stay calm and stick to the facts no matter how personal their attacks become. I practiced controlling my expressions and voice, responding to provocative questions with measured precision rather than emotional reactions. It was exhausting work but necessary. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios, being barred from the industry I loved, owing hundreds of thousands in damages, becoming unhireable due to a reputation as a litigation risk. By morning, I was running on adrenaline and fear. The courthouse was a towering stone building with imposing columns and long hallways of polished marble. Our footsteps echoed as Rachel led me to the designated room for depositions. Techvision's legal team was already there, 3 attorneys in expensive suits arranged around Ryan and Grace, who pointedly avoided looking in my direction. Michael Harrington, Techvision's lead counsel, was a tall man with silver hair and a reputation for aggressive litigation against former employees. He had successfully enforced non-compete agreements for several major tech companies in the past. The court reporters swore me in, and the deposition began. Michael started with seemingly innocent questions about my education, my role at Techvision, and my responsibilities at Datasphere. "Miss Mitchell, can you describe your current duties at Datasphere?" he asked, his tone conversational. "I work as a senior engineer developing prediction algorithms for business intelligence applications," I answered carefully, following Rachel's guidance to be truthful but not overly detailed. "And these prediction algorithms, would you say they are similar to the ones you developed at Techvision?" His eyebrows raised slightly. Rachel interjected objection, vague and potentially calling for disclosure of confidential information. Michael rephrased. "Let me be more specific. Are you working on seasonal prediction algorithms at Datasphere, similar to the patent-pending technology you helped develop at Techvision?" "I am working in the field of predictive analytics, which is my area of expertise," I replied. "But I have not used any proprietary Techvision code methods or business information in my work at Datasphere." The questioning continued in this vein for over an hour, with Michael trying to establish overlaps between my work at the 2 companies. Then, he shifted strategy. "Miss Mitchell, why did you leave Techvision?" This was territory we had prepared for. I described the credit theft, the retaliatory performance review, and the demotion to legacy systems maintenance. I maintained a professional tone, presenting facts without emotional coloring. Michael's expression remained skeptical. "So you left because you felt insufficiently appreciated, not because Datasphere offered you a 40% raise." The compensation was a factor I acknowledged, but I would not have been looking for new opportunities if I had been treated fairly at Techvision. Michael presented my performance review, highlighting the needs improvement ratings. "Is not it more accurate to say you left because your performance was declining and you knew you might be terminated?" I took a deep breath before responding. That review came after I raised concerns about proper attribution for my work. Before that incident, all my reviews were excellent, as you can see from the previous documentation. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair as I referenced the timing of the negative review. Michael quickly moved on. The questioning continued for 3 more hours, covering everything from specific code I had written to conversations with colleagues. By the time we broke for lunch, I was mentally exhausted but felt I had held my ground. When we reconvened, it was Ryan's turn to be deposed. Rachel questioned him about the seasonal prediction feature, the patent application, and his history of managing female engineers. His answers were polished but occasionally contradictory, especially when confronted with email evidence. "Mr. Taylor, in this email dated March 15th, you told the executive team that the seasonal prediction algorithm was, quote, my latest innovation that will differentiate us from competitors, end quote. Yet the initial concept document and all the substantive code commits came from Miss Mitchell. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Ryan cleared his throat. "As CTO, I provide the vision and direction for all technical innovations at Techvision. Individual engineers implement specific components, but the overarching concepts originate with leadership." Rachel presented more emails showing my original pitch for the feature, dated before any input from Ryan. His explanations became increasingly convoluted as he tried to reconcile the documentary evidence with his claims. The most dramatic moment came when Diana testified via video conference. She described witnessing Ryan take credit for my work during meetings and confirmed the pattern of similar behavior toward other female engineers. It was an open secret among the women at Techvision, Diana stated. If you came up with something good, you had to decide whether to keep quiet and let Ryan take credit or speak up and face retaliation. Grace from HR appeared visibly uncomfortable during this testimony, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. After 2 exhausting days of depositions, we reached the pivotal moment. Michael was reviewing the non-compete agreement, preparing to argue for its enforcement despite the new law. Your Honor, he began addressing the judge who would review the deposition, while we acknowledge the recent legislative changes, we contend that Ms. Mitchell falls under the exceptions provided in Section 4, Paragraph B of the statute, which allows for enforcement in cases involving senior employees with access to highly sensitive proprietary information. He proceeded to read the relevant section of the law aloud. Non-compete agreements may be enforced for a period not exceeding 3 months against employees who both 1 earned compensation exceeding $150,000 annually and 2 had direct access to highly sensitive proprietary information that would provide a competitor with an unfair advantage. Any non-compete exceeding this duration is automatically reduced to the maximum allowable period of 3 months. Michael suddenly stopped reading, his expression changing as he processed the implications of the words he had just spoken. He looked at his client with dawning horror, then quickly flipped through his notes. Rachel smiled subtly beside me. We both knew what had just happened. Michael had just confirmed in official court proceedings that even if the non-compete was deemed valid, it could only be enforced for 3 months, not the full year Techvision was demanding. Moreover, since I had earned less than the threshold amount, it was likely unenforceable entirely. The judge, Jennifer Watkins, was watching Michael's reaction with interest. Counselor, do you wish to continue? Michael conferred hurriedly with his colleagues, then addressed the court. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to consult with our clients. Granted, Judge Watkins replied. We will reconvene in 20 minutes. As they left the room, I turned to Rachel. Did what I think just happened actually happen? Rachel nodded, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. He just argued our case for us. Even under their interpretation of the law, the non-compete would be limited to 3 months. Since you have already been at Datasphere for nearly that long by now, the point is essentially moot. Additionally, she continued, they would still need to prove you earned over the threshold amount and had access to highly sensitive information, neither of which is likely given your actual compensation and role. For the first time since the lawsuit began, I felt a surge of genuine hope. The law was clearly on our side, and now even Techvision's own attorney had inadvertently confirmed it. When the Techvision team returned from their impromptu conference, the atmosphere had noticeably shifted. Michael looked grim, his earlier confidence replaced with a resigned professionalism. Ryan, however, appeared flushed with anger, repeatedly whispering to his attorney, despite Michael's attempts to silence him. Your Honor, Michael began, after consulting with my clients, we wish to propose a settlement conference to discuss resolution of this matter outside of court. Judge Watkins nodded. That seems prudent. Does opposing counsel agree? Rachel looked to me for confirmation. I gave a slight nod. We are open to settlement discussions, Your Honor, Rachel responded. However, we maintain that the non-compete agreement is unenforceable under current law, and we would expect any settlement to acknowledge this reality. The parties will arrange a settlement conference within 7 days, Judge Watkins ordered. If no resolution is reached, we will proceed with the preliminary injunction hearing as scheduled. As we gathered our materials to leave, Rachel whispered to me, this is their way of retreating without admitting defeat. They know their case has fundamental problems now. In the hallway outside, I overheard Ryan arguing heatedly with Michael. We cannot just give up, Ryan insisted. She took our proprietary technology to a direct competitor. Mr. Taylor, Michael replied in a strained voice, the law is unambiguous. The non-compete is likely unenforceable, and even if it were partially valid, the 3-month period is nearly elapsed. Continuing this litigation would be costly, with minimal potential benefit. Then we focus on the trade secrets claim, Ryan persisted. She must have taken something with her. Michael sighed audibly. We have no evidence of any misappropriation of trade secrets. The discovery process has not revealed a single document or piece of code that Miss Mitchell took with her. Without evidence, that claim will be dismissed. I could not help feeling vindicated as I listened to their argument. My careful adherence to legal and ethical boundaries, despite Ryan's provocations, was now protecting me. The settlement conference was scheduled for the following week at a neutral location, a conference room in an upscale downtown hotel. I arrived with Rachel and 2 attorneys from DataSphere's legal team. Techvision brought Michael, his associate, Ryan, and surprisingly, CEO Andrew Peters. Andrew approached me before the formal discussions began, stepping away from his team to speak privately. Elisa, I want you to know that I was not fully informed about the circumstances of your departure, he said, his expression troubled. The information presented during depositions has raised serious concerns about how certain matters were handled. I was stunned by this unexpected acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that, Andrew. I truly enjoyed working at Techvision before things went sideways. Andrew nodded. I pride myself on building a company where innovation is rewarded, regardless of who generates it. If that has not been your experience, then we have failed in our values. Our conversation was cut short as the mediator called the meeting to order, but Andrew's words stayed with me throughout the proceedings. The settlement discussions were tense but productive. Michael, now seemingly motivated to resolve the case, quickly proposed dropping all claims against me and DataSphere in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement regarding Techvision's proprietary information. Rachel countered with our terms. Techvision would drop all claims, pay my legal fees, issue a corrective attribution for the seasonal prediction patent, and implement anti-discrimination training for leadership. The patent attribution and discrimination training are non-negotiable. Ryan objected. Those demands go far beyond the scope of this case. To everyone's surprise, Andrew interrupted. Actually, I believe these terms are reasonable. If we have not been properly attributing intellectual contributions or treating our team members equitably, those are issues that need correction regardless of this lawsuit. Ryan stared at his CEO in disbelief. Andrew, you cannot be serious. This would be admitting wrongdoing where none exists. What it would be doing, Andrew replied firmly, is demonstrating our commitment to our stated company values. The depositions raised legitimate concerns about our practices that I intend to address with or without this settlement. The dynamic in the room shifted dramatically. With Andrew now effectively siding with our position, Ryan was isolated in his objections. After several more hours of negotiation over specific wording, we reached an agreement that satisfied all parties except Ryan, who sulked silently as the documents were prepared. The final settlement included: 1. Techvision would dismiss all claims against me and DataSphere with prejudice, meaning they could not be refiled. 2. Techvision would pay all my legal expenses. 3. The patent application for the seasonal prediction system would be amended to list me as the primary inventor with Ryan as a contributor. 4. Techvision would implement mandatory training on intellectual property attribution and gender equity for all leadership. 5. I would maintain confidentiality regarding Techvision's proprietary information, which I had been doing anyway. 6. All parties would refrain from disparaging each other publicly. As we left the settlement conference, Rachel gave me a congratulatory hug. This is better than we could have hoped for in court, she said. Andrew Peters turning on Ryan was unexpected but decisive. What happens to Ryan now? I asked, curious about the internal fallout. That is not our concern, Rachel reminded me. But based on Andrew's reaction, I would not be surprised if there were significant changes in Techvision's leadership soon. I later learned from Diana, who had remained at Techvision, that Andrew had initiated an internal investigation into Ryan's management practices immediately following the settlement. The investigation uncovered numerous instances of credit theft, biased performance reviews, and retaliatory actions against employees who challenged him, particularly women. 2 months after our settlement, Ryan resigned to pursue other opportunities, according to Techvision's press release. The company also announced a new head of HR and the creation of an ethics and attribution committee to ensure proper credit for innovations. The lawsuit that was meant to silence and punish me had instead exposed a pattern of discrimination and intellectual theft that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. In attempting to enforce an invalid non-compete agreement, Techvision had inadvertently triggered a chain of events that would ultimately make it a better workplace. As for me, the settlement freed me to focus fully on my work at DataSphere without the cloud of litigation hanging over my head. The amended patent with my name as primary inventor became the first of several that I would develop in my career, a permanent record of my contribution to the field. 1 year after the settlement, my life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted when I first walked into Techvision with stars in my eyes. At DataSphere, I had been promoted to lead engineer for the predictive analytics division, managing a team of 8 talented developers. My seasonal prediction algorithm, now enhanced with new capabilities, had become one of our flagship features. The patent with my name as primary inventor had been granted a professional validation that sometimes still felt surreal when I saw the framed certificate on my office wall. More importantly, the experience had given me a confidence and resilience that no technical achievement could match. I heard through industry channels that Ryan had struggled to find another CTO position after leaving Techvision. The tech world can be surprisingly small, and word had spread about the real reasons behind his departure. He eventually landed at a much smaller company, with presumably less opportunity to appropriate others' work. Techvision itself had undergone significant changes. Andrew had been true to his word about addressing the cultural issues. Diana, who still worked there, reported that the new HR director had implemented robust processes for documenting contributions to projects and patents. The Ethics and Attribution Committee had real teeth, with the power to override even executive decisions about credit allocation. "It is actually a decent place to work now," Diana told me over coffee one weekend. "Several women have been promoted to leadership roles, and there is much more transparency about how performance is evaluated." I was glad for my former colleagues, though I had no regrets about my own path. DataSphere had proven to be everything Techvision had initially promised, but failed to deliver a meritocracy where innovation was recognized regardless of gender or seniority. Samantha, my manager, had become both mentor and friend. Unlike Ryan, she was secure enough in her own achievements to celebrate her team's successes. When I developed a new algorithm for detecting anomalous patterns in financial data, she made sure the entire company knew it was my creation. "Leadership is about lifting others up, not standing on their shoulders," she told me during one of our regular mentoring sessions. "The best ideas can come from anywhere in an organization, and acknowledging that only makes the organization stronger." Inspired by my experience, I began speaking at Women in Tech conferences about intellectual property rights, non-compete agreements, and navigating gender politics in technical roles. My story resonated with many women who had faced similar situations but lacked the legal knowledge or support to fight back. Rachel and I stayed in touch occasionally, meeting for lunch to catch up. She had used our case as an example in seminars about the changing landscape of employment law. "Your case has become something of a reference point," she told me during one of these lunches. "I have had several clients come in specifically because they heard about the engineer who beat an unfair non-compete. You have helped more people than you know." The most meaningful outcome, however, was the women's mentorship group I founded at DataSphere. Meeting monthly, we created a safe space for female engineers to share challenges, celebrate victories, and support each other's growth. What began with 4 women had expanded to over 30, including participants from other companies in the area. Through this group, I met Bria, a brilliant young engineer, facing a situation painfully similar to what I had experienced. Her manager was claiming credit for her innovative algorithm, and she was considering leaving the field entirely. I just do not know if it is worth the fight, she confessed during one meeting. Maybe tech just is not for women like me. Tech is exactly for women like you, I assured her. The problem is not your fit for the industry. It is the industry's failure to properly value your contributions. I helped Bria document her work and prepare for a meeting with her company's CTO. Unlike me, she had contemporaneous records of her development process and witnesses willing to confirm her authorship. With proper preparation and support, she successfully reclaimed credit for her work without having to leave her company. Watching her confidence bloom afterward reminded me of my own journey. The pain and stress of the lawsuit had been real, but so was the growth it triggered. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to create change. The lesson I shared most often with the women I mentored was this: document everything. Every idea, every line of code, every contribution. Not because you are paranoid, but because your work deserves proper attribution. Your innovations matter, and so does your name on them. I also emphasize the importance of understanding employment contracts before signing them. Read every word, especially about intellectual property rights and restrictions like non-competes. Know the laws in your state. Information is power, particularly when others are counting on your ignorance. Perhaps the most personal lesson was learning to trust my own worth. When Ryan first began taking credit for my work, I had doubted myself, wondering if perhaps I was overvaluing my contributions. That self-doubt had nearly cost me not just a patent, but my career in the field I loved. Your work has intrinsic value. I now tell every woman who joins our mentorship group. That value does not diminish because someone with more power claims it as their own. Stand firm in knowing what you have created, and do not let anyone convince you otherwise. The non-compete agreement that was meant to control and limit me had instead set me free in unexpected ways. By fighting it, I had not only secured my right to work where I chose, but had also helped expose and correct a toxic pattern that had harmed many others. Sometimes I think about that moment in the deposition, when I watched Michael read the law aloud and realize its implications. The look of horror on his face as he understood that his own argument had undermined his case. The way Ryan's confidence crumbled as his carefully constructed narrative fell apart. In that moment, my smile had not been about revenge or schadenfreude. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes justice does prevail. Sometimes the truth is enough. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who tried to take credit for your work or ideas? How did you handle the situation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found my journey inspiring, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about navigating challenges in professional environments. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is worth it even when it is difficult. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, document everything, know your rights, and never let anyone diminish your worth.